Okay, we've made it to the last presentation of Sanibel 2020, so if you'll just hang with me for a couple more minutes. As Susan said, my name is Jake Short, and I'm a second-year clinical perfusion student at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Today, I'll be presenting original research that I conducted with Mohammed and David Holt titled Effects of Oxygenator Changeout Simulations on Patient Safety. I'll discuss some brief background information on simulation, talk about our study question and objectives, how we went about conducting the research, then finish up with the results and conclusions of the study. So how do clinicians practice their trade? In general, practice falls into one of the four following categories. What we're taught in school, so going back to the basics. We have a professor at UNMC who teaches us during stressful times, such as a catastrophic event, to not forget our basics. Remember those fundamental elements we learned in the very beginning. Also, we learn based on our best judgment given the situation and conditions, the best intentions of our intuition and motivation to deliver quality care, and local practice patterns that may influence or drive our practice. So what is the policy at your institution? Does your department practice oxygenator changeouts on a yearly or bi-yearly basis, or not at all? Research shows us that gaps still exist between our current clinical practice and that to which we aspire. In turn, as a goal, we should bridge that gap between knowing and doing. So, one way we can bridge that gap is through the use of simulation. We've heard quite a bit about simulation this week. Edward and Bruce spoke a little about simulation and its use at their program at SUNY Upstate on Wednesday, and we just heard from Nicole at Vanderbilt, and she gave a wonderful background on simulation and how it has evolved to where we are today. So here are just a couple broad points about simulation as a whole. Medical simulation was introduced more than 60 years ago and has the capability of using a whole body mannequin with integrated electronic patient monitoring controlled by computers. These simulators are capable of imitating numerous clinical scenarios and patient characteristics to mimic those seen in a real patient. Simulators also have the ability to react to the interventions performed by the learner appropriately. Through this method of teaching, clinical skills can be developed along with leadership and communication skills. Ultimately, simulation allows for unlimited practice in a safe yet familiar environment. As we know, there are multiple risks associated with changing out an oxygenator. Some of those risks include gross air and gaseous microemboli, neurological complications, infection, blood loss, user error, as well as others. Due to these complications, Mohammed and I asked the key question: does simulation have the ability to affect the efficiency of correcting a catastrophic event while on bypass? From that question, we began thinking of ways we could answer the key question through data, and ultimately developed the following hypothesis. Performing simulation practice of oxygenator changeouts will decrease the time for reinstitution of cardiopulmonary bypass. From the beginning, our objectives of this study was to determine if there's a difference in time to complete an oxygenator changeout before and after simulation. In addition to meeting our study objective, we hoped that participants would gain something from our research as well. So we set out with the following participant education objectives. Identify the signs and parameters of a failing oxygenator, practice proper communication with surgical staff during a catastrophic event, identify the items needed to change out an oxygenator, and outline the critical actions needed to successfully change out an oxygenator in a safe but timely manner. So for our study population, we decided that we would use the class of 2020 University of Nebraska Medical Center clinical perfusion students, my classmates. We then sent out a recruitment email to each student, and 10 students were able to participate in our study. Once the sample size was selected, statistical software determined that 10 participants would achieve an 83% power to detect a mean of paired differences of 14 seconds between the first trial and trials 2 and 3 after simulation. A sample size of 10 also predicted a standard deviation of 11 and a significance level of 0.025. And here you can see my beautiful classmates who are our sample population. So each student was scheduled in an individual 1-hour time block to come to the lab at UNMC and perform these oxygenator changeouts. Upon arrival, they were given a patient scenario in which they would be required to change out a failing oxygenator on bypass. They were told they would be performing 3 individual time trials. The timer would start when bypass was terminated and stopped when bypass was reestablished. For the first trial, the participants were not given any directions or guidance from the investigators. Following the first trial, a debrief period was held to discuss the participants' results and how to improve their performance. During this time, they were also given an oxygenator changeout protocol designed specifically for the pump setup being used in the simulation. The students were then asked to complete an oxygenator changeout a second and third time with debriefs following each trial. Upon completion, all data was sent to a statistician for analysis. So here you can see our results. In the top table, you have trials 1, 2, and 3, and then the last 2 lines is the difference between trials 2 and 1 and 3 and 1. So in the first trial, the mean was 229 seconds, and the median was 218, with a minimum of 160 and a maximum of 346 seconds. So what we discovered as the students kept coming in, about halfway through, we realized that since we were not giving the students any directions to begin with, they would come in, and while 160 seconds sounds great, that student did not use stale technique. The lines were on the floor. They might have tapped the oxygenator a couple times, but they sent a lot of air to their patient. And they came in, they changed out the oxygenator, but it was not a simulated environment. So then, after the debrief period, you can see in the box plot that our quartiles were much closer, except for one outlier at the top with 415 seconds. So between trials 1 and 2, the average decreased by 8 seconds for an average of 221 seconds and a median of 194, with a minimum of 146 seconds, and then outlier of 415. Following an additional debrief period, a third trial was held, and the difference between the first trial and third trial average time was a decrease in 34 seconds and a median decrease in 23 seconds, for a minimum of 137 and a maximum of 294 seconds. Unfortunately, our p-values came back at 0.49 and 0.19, so our results were not significant. In addition, all the students claimed at the end of the study that they benefited from the simulation and that they definitely felt more comfortable if they had to change out an oxygenator on bypass. Also, when we started working for our pig labs, where we knew we were going to have to change out oxygenators, it was often discussed. I remember when Jake and Mohammed said this, or Mohammed taught me this, or do you still have a copy of that protocol so we can reference it? So while our data was not significant, we do feel that the students really benefited from this simulation and from this study. And it's always important to remember that practice makes perfect. So here are my references. I do want to say a special thanks to Mohammed as my research partner, to Feng Kui, she was our statistician, to David Holt, Ben Greenfield, and Scott Sanderson as our faculty members, and to the Sanibel Symposium for allowing me to present today. Thank you.